Welcome to my initial impressions on the
Gravity Pro 2.0.
So I had the chance to hit this thing when I was down at Tennis Warehouse last month, but I also just hit it again yesterday with Luca from Rackets and Runners, and there have been some pretty legitimate changes to this Gravity Pro. Number one, we now have cap grommets, and I think we're seeing this across the Gravity line. So if you don't know what cap grommets are, they're famous for being on the Prestiges, and you can see it's kind of closed off here, right? The grommet really protects the whole frame. With the Gravities, it's only a half cap, so it's just the normal amount of bumper strip. It's not going all the way down like these older Prestiges, but it does still cover the outside of the strings on the grommet, so you wouldn't have any string breakage from kind of scraping the ground, which usually doesn't happen except on really thin bumpers, like sometimes on arrows. Anyway, so that's one change. The other change is the RA is a little bit lower, as we kind of expect from these Auxetic 2.0 updates. You know, anytime you're adding more softening material to the throat, which is what Auxetic is, that makes it easier to bend down this way, which is exactly how they measure RA. And the hoop face still feels relatively the same, like you're not feeling like suddenly a ton of extra bending with this frame. So I do think the change in RA is relatively inconsequential for most players. What is consequential and is the biggest change that I haven't actually seen a lot of people mention yet is they've changed the balance point. So every other Gravity Pro, starting with 360 plus, then onto Auxetic 1, has had a 315 millimeter balance point. For Auxetic 2.0, they've pulled that down to 31 centimeters even. And so I think a big part of that change was to address the concerns with maneuverability that we've seen with past Gravity Pros. The Gravity Pro is a little bit sluggish, not necessarily compared to other rackets in its weight class, but it's a hefty stick. Like, it's got a thick beam, so it needs quite a bit of head weight to stay stable. So pulling that balance point down, they're trying to give you more head lightness, give you a little bit easier access to swing speed, which is one of the things people have struggled with in the past. And along with that lower balance point change, the swing weight seems like it's also coming down a little bit. I think now Head is really aiming for like 330 to be kind of the maximum swing weight across the batches that they're gonna offer. So that's gonna offer you a lot more avenues into customization. So with this lower balance point and this lower static weight, it'll be really easy for players who just want their old Gravity Pro to add a couple of grams to the tip, whether that be 12 or 10 and 2, to get a spec that's almost the exact same as previous Gravity Pros. But now we're opening up to a more wide-ranging audience where it's easier to pick up and play for people who aren't used to such heavy frames and want a little bit easier access to swing speed. For me personally, the Gravity Pro has felt slow, but if I force myself to get in this mood of like going after every single shot, I'm really able to find plenty of power and swing speed. I think how thin the beam is, you know, we're dealing with a 20 millimeter beam still. The Gravity Pro does cut through the air really quickly, and it is easy, especially for me now that I'm in a little bit better shape than I was in my last Gravity Pro review. It's a little bit easier for me to find swing speed with these frames, whether it be the new Auxetic 2.0 with the lower balance point, which it's really easy to instantly find swing speed, or Simon's old Graphene 360 plus versions. And I'll throw a hitting footage of me also just ripping the crap out of the ball with that frame. In terms of feel, I really don't think that much has changed. Yeah, it's a little bit softer. Yeah, it has a little bit more of this Auxetic character of the great popping snap, but it's just not as extreme as you'll find in other frames like the Boom or the Extremes, or even the Speeds. You still get a very solid hitting feel, and I think he's certainly more solid than anything else in Head's lineup. I think part of that comes from how thin the beam is, so the layup of graphite just feels dense and solid. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I don't know how thick the layups end up being. Seems like graphene is a thinning layup, but anyway. Because Head produced such a great racket, like I think an all-time classic with their 360 version, so the first one that came out, they're just not making any major changes to these frames. And I think what they've done with this Auxetic 2.0 update absolutely solves any problems that they might have had in terms of reaching a larger audience, but it still makes it really appealing to old Gravity Pro users, which I think is extremely important because they have pros using that mold, you know, just like a lot of really high level players that you wouldn't want to take out from something that feels comfortable. So a few other observations on the impact of the lowering of the balance point. It's not super noticeable if you're not hitting them back to back. I think the drop in swing weight is going to be more noticeable for most players, but I find myself really finding that more Rublev style forehand as opposed to a Zverev style forehand, as Zverev uses quite a bit heavier balance point. And that makes sense because apparently Zverev has switched to the old Gravity Tour 100 mold, still with the Auxetic layup. And so now I guess we're only really looking at Rublev as actually using the Gravity Pro, which is pretty interesting because they made the racket for Zverev. I think it's easy to find plenty of power in spin as long as you get your swing speed up. What I love about the Gravities is how wide the head shape is. Like if you compare to my old Extreme Tour, which is the same mold as the last one, which is a spin racket, the Gravity is wider. I don't know if you can really see it, but it's quite a bit wider out at 3 and 9. It's got this more circular shape, right? And that really lends itself well to spin. You'd think the Extreme, it's the spin racket, it would have the spin head shape, but one of the ways that we generate spin as players is taking a steeper angle of attack, brushing up the back of the ball a little bit more, right? This. So if you have that kind of motion, having distance here increases how aggressively you can swing up the back of the ball, which is called spin window. So the Gravities have a really wide spin window, especially with this thin beam. It helps you avoid shanking as you brush up. So I actually think there's a case to be made that the Gravity series, and the Pro included, is very, very spin friendly because it offers the ability to the player to apply a huge amount of spin if they want. So I always find myself, especially now, finding a lot of spin and swing speed with these Gravities. It cuts through the air and it's so boardy, right? Like that 1820 offers so much directional control that you really feel like A, you can rip it and the ball will always stay in, and B, you have to rip it to find any kind of depth. You can see in my hitting footage against Jonas, I'm struggling a little bit to find depth because we tried so many rackets that day. I warmed up with my Pure Aero Rafa, which is like almost the complete opposite from this Gravity, right? Super open 16x19 pattern, high launch angle, very stiff. Going to the Gravity is always an adjustment, but it's not a hard adjustment for me. I always really enjoy my time anytime I'm using a Gravity Pro. So I think very smart updates by Head. I love the paint job on these. I probably won't make a full review on the Gravity Pro because, like I said, what I want to say about the changes that they've made, and I don't think there's anything super interesting because they haven't changed it that much, which again I think is good, but it just doesn't really want to make me revisit it, at least in the near future. Great racket. Easy recommend, easier to recommend to more players now than ever before. Great job by him. If you want to pick up a Gravity Pro for yourself, you can do so using my links in the description below to Tennis Warehouse Europe, or Tennis Only. That's the best way to support the channel if you appreciate our content. I do my best to provide unbiased content to whatever degree that is even possible. I try to be fair with all my reviews, and thanks so much for watching. Really looking forward to...
Oh, just a Pro?
Yeah.
Oh, Pro. Pro is so tricky.